Hi, welcome to the Soulful Leader podcast. Maren and I are super excited because we have a special guest today, Dr. Rosie Ross. And this is a woman unlike no other. Let me just tell you, this woman has reached inside her own soul and elevated it to a whole new possibility. And in doing so, she inspired me when I met her some time ago back in Ottawa at a speaking convention with Maren. And she talks about menopause and talks about the things that, that we don't really talk about because we have so much shame about.
Yeah.
And that's what we talk about in the Soulful Leader is like, the shame is what keeps us disconnected. It keeps us from really being vulnerable and real and alive. And actually that's our superpower. So
You wouldn't think that talking about menopause would be
a
like an
superpower.
exciting, right? Or an exciting subject. And I will tell you all, you will fall in love with Dr. Rosie the way that Stephanie and I did. We talk about everything from, all the taboo subjects to, I love her. She started her talk where Stephanie and I met her with all these women who are doing great and amazing things on the quote unquote wrong side of 40. So if you've ever either felt like you were on the wrong side of 40 or you know somebody that is or that you've thought that they are, this is a podcast you guys need to listen to because we're actually on the right side of 40. We're just getting into our prime and owning our power.
That's right.
It's
It's no longer downhill from here. We
it's
might be
oh my
hot physically, but we are also hot internally and ready to fire up in
It's
a whole new way
amazing.
that we don't have to have hot flashes.
Yeah. So, without further ado, I think you guys will just love this podcast. We can't wait to hear from you. And please welcome Dr. Rosie Ross. In a world where achievements and accolades motivate us to do more and be more, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there is more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old, push your way through, and claim the deeper life that's calling you.
That's where we excel.
We're your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren Oslak.
And this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Sit back and relax as we share the shortcuts we've uncovered to help you make shift happen. So this is a super exciting conversation for us. And Dr. Rosie, please, welcome to the show. And could you just tell us a smidge about why you are so passionate about what you're doing right now?
Thank you. Wonderful to be with everyone today. So what I do is I really am passionate about helping women make their midlife years positively life-changing. And I have a number of reasons why, but so I'll just share a couple if I may. The first reason is because every woman is different. Every woman's experience of their midlife years, which officially is 40 to 65, and during that time going through the menopausal transition into what I consider the next wonderful stage of life, is because there are so many different ways that this may be experienced. And that for some women, or many women in my experience that I see in consultations, they feel really anxious and uncertain about what's going on. So if I can perhaps share the first part about the different experience that women have. So when I was going through medical school and I was in my midlife years, I had one lecture about menopause in the 6 years of my undergraduate degree.
And so in all 6 years of your undergraduate, you only had one course that addressed menopause. Okay.
One lecture. Yeah. But anyway, that I recall.
Yeah.
And for me, my understanding was it was all about hot flashes and night sweats and maybe disrupted sleeping and mood changes and those are certainly part of those hormonal experiences as they change during that time. What I didn't recognize, though, that there's a whole lot of other symptoms or experience that women may experience. And so for me, as I was going through those changing hormone levels and going through, to enter into menopause, I was experiencing no hot flashes, so don't hate me, ladies. And I didn't have any of those nights where my sleep was pretty okay. But what I experienced was escalating anxiety and brain fog and difficulty with word finding. And for me, that was quite awful because as part of medical studies, there are not only the written exams, there are also oral exams. And so you'd have a couple of doctors in front of you, 2 or 3, and they'd be firing questions at you. And here I am in this perimenopause or menopausal transition, and I'm thinking I'd suddenly go blank, or I wouldn't be able to find the words, or I'd have this, this brain fog issue. And that's not a great look when you're trying to pass exams. So I realized that there are different experiences that women have. And the other thing that I recognize that has really prompted me and made me so passionate about helping women to better understand this journey is that there are quite a number of women who really don't know what to expect or what might happen. And so, and that can bring uncertainty and escalate their anxiety. And I just wanted to help women better understand, the changes that may be occurring in their body as they move through this transitional time. So there you go.
Like, I am so excited that you are here and sharing this, because as a therapist myself, I cannot tell you, when I started to go through menopause and having hot flashes and the irritability and the brain fog, I'm thinking, why aren't we talking about this? And the inner narrative, the inner story that I'm telling myself is like, am I the only one that's going through this? Like, am I crazy? And then you take that, and here I am in a world where I am looking after other people as a therapist, as well as, having a company, and I'm in a leadership role, and I'm a hot mess inside and out. I'm a hot mess. And I think, as we're talking about soulful leadership, and you are such a soulful leader, because in your midlife, you took an about face and completely changed your whole inner and outer world. And you did it during midlife. And I think there's something really wonderful there. I was just remembering, do you remember the movie Fried Green Tomatoes with Kathy Bates?
Love that movie.
Me too. And when I saw it, of course, I was much younger, because that's when it first came out, obviously. But there's that opening scene of Kathy Bates, of going to the grocery store, and she's got her car and she's trying to find a parking spot, and she finds one. And this young, little, vibrant, probably in her 20s, early 20s, in a convertible, cuts her off and takes the spot. And the young, little, perky 20-year-old gets out and looks at Kathy Bates and says, "I'm younger and faster," or something very, crass. And Kathy Bates backs up and then goes forward and slams into her convertible, rolls down her window, and she goes, "I'm older and have more insurance." And there's that, and I laugh, because I remember, because at that time, I was probably that young, perky 20-year-old watching Fried Green Tomatoes. And I just got thinking, I'm like, is this midlife? Is this what that is? But there's a leadership to Kathy Bates. Like, she just dropped in and was like, I don't care. This is who I am. And there's like a chutzpah to a recognizing one's inner growth, inner power, inner wisdom. And I think that's, what really drew me to you, Dr. Rosie, was, wow, like, I heard you speak and I heard you go through your talk of your life story. And I'm like, this is empowering. Why do we think we have to wait when we're in our 20s, that we think that that's our power, when really we do get better with age? We know who we are, we know what we want, what we don't want, what we'll say yes to, what we need to say no to. And I think what you're sharing and what you're mentoring and even what you're embodying is so inspiring.
Yeah, I love that movie. I remember being young, and so I would like to go back and actually rewatch that now from this perspective as a midlife woman. Yeah, brilliant.
Because so here you are now, gone to medical school in your 40s, right? And written a book, have a wonderful website that I've been excited about because you've got like the 10 commandments, and we're going to hear more about that too. But I'm curious with you too, because our listeners don't know the backstory of how you even got into this, how you even decided to go to med school in your 40s. Like I mean, to go to med school in your 20s is a huge commitment, let alone in your 40s. So I'd love to hear that story again and to share that with our listeners. Like, what was it within you that gave you the courage and the longing and the desire to go and do that?
Oh, thank you. Well, it's been a long and winding road to become a medical doctor. So I will take us back to at 17. My father became made redundant from his job. And so there were 6 children at home. My mum was a full-time carer, and dad was unable, he'd become totally blind. And so he was unable to find work at that stage. And so I was had just finished year 11. I was about to go into year 12, the last year of high school in Australia. I'm not sure what it is in the US and Canada. Is it the same in?
It's the same.
Yeah. Thank you. And so, I've got one more year to complete before I graduate. However, I needed to go and work to support my family. And I did that. I was really happy to do that. And I opened the paper, and there was an opportunity to become a nurse. And so I went and studied nursing for 3 years, and I graduated. And I graduated with a high distinction, and I was really happy about that. And one of the doctors at the graduation ceremony said, "Why didn't you do medicine?" And I didn't like to say, I gave him some offhand comment, but really I just felt very dumb because I hadn't completed my schooling. It was something that I would go on for many years to regret. So I really encourage people to finish their schooling. And then I worked in some high dependency units in a big city hospital. And I then got married, had 3 children, studied natural therapies, herbal medicine, became a naturopathic practitioner. I was seeing patients in my home. And then I realized, and I said to my husband, people that really need the most help are the people that don't really have as much money. Wouldn't it be fantastic if I could just give some over-the-counter advice and people could, utilize what they wanted? And then, if they wanted to go further than that, we make a consultation. I know I'm taking a bit of a time here, but I'd like to give you this backstory.
Yeah.
Thanks. And so because I'm really passionate about educating people, health literacy, empowering women, you can probably start to hear it in my voice. I'm still passionate about that. And so this was on a Friday, and I opened the Saturday paper, and there was a health food shop for sale. And it was called My Goodness Whole Foods. And I thought, okay, I think this is a bit of a sign. So bought it, and I just loved being able to give that over-the-counter advice and being available for people. And I want you to know, I'd had no experience in retail, no experience as a shop. I had nothing, but I had a lot of enthusiasm. So I was in my 30s at this time. And what happened was, as I was serving customers, there would be certain products that I would say to them, look, this is one. So, for example, St. John's wort, that you really need to let your doctor know if there's an issue with being on an antidepressant, because this can potentially interact. And I'd be really interested, because people would say to me, I'm not telling my doctor. And I would be curious, and I'd say, yeah, I'm curious. Why would that be? And they say, well, my doctor just dismisses me, looking at these complementary or alternative therapies, and they just think it's a whole lot of rubbish. And I thought, this is really concerning, because there are potential, drug and herbal or supplement interactions. And so I would really encourage them to go and speak to their health practitioner. And then as time went on, with the permission, I'd actually write to, for formal consultations, I'd write to the doctors and let them know that this was what the person was on, and I'd give them a whole lot of information about potential interactions and just start educating some of the doctors around town too. And there were a couple of GPs who were fabulous. I lived in Hobart at that time, which is in Tasmania, the state which is like a heart shape at the bottom of Australia. It's an island. And there was one doctor who one day said to me, Rosie, why don't you study medicine? And here I am in my early 40s. And I stopped for a moment and I thought, I'm too old. And then I stopped that thought immediately, and I thought, I don't want to look back on my life with regret. And this is something, why not? Why don't I just go for it? Why don't I go and study? Because, in X amount of years, I'll be, X years older, and I'll either have a medical degree or I won't. And if I fail, so what? At least I've tried. So that was my thinking. And so I went to my local university, which was in Hobart, and they said, well, you don't have your leaving certificate. You need to go back to school and get that. And so what I did was I actually sat in with the 16 and 17-year-olds for 2 years. There were 1,200 at Rosie College. They were so cool. And I was literally old enough to be their mother. And I have to tell you, the scariest day of my life was actually going up those stairs it felt like a sea of people, and enrolling to study. And I studied everything, maths and science and physics and chemistry and all the things that I would need to get a really good, and I had to work hard for a good score. So for 2 years, I did that. And interestingly, when I was in year 12, my youngest daughter, Rhiannon, actually was in year 11. So can you imagine driving your daughter to school and not just dropping them off, but actually parking the car, getting out and, going in there. We were in different classes. We were in different years. And I'd offered to go elsewhere to a different high school, but she was so cool with it. And she said, no, that's fine. So sometimes I even had friends at high school. So sometimes her friends and her and I and my friends would actually meet up in the, eat up in the cafeteria area and have a chat. It was really great. So I passed with a fabulous score, and then I had to go through the process of interviews and sitting another big psychometric exam, which was 3 hours that anybody in Australia going into a health area is required to sit. And then so I applied to Tasmania. They didn't want to take me on. And so my husband at the time recommended, look, why don't you apply to some universities on the mainland? So the rest of Australia is called, according to Tasmania, is the mainland. And so I did, and I was accepted at both universities. And I chose to go to the University of New South Wales, which I absolutely loved. It was a 6-year degree. And at that time, I was 42 when I went back to high school. I was 44 when I started medicine. Wow. And during that time, there was a time that I nearly gave up because there were a whole lot of midlife issues happening. However, I continued on, and I graduated at 51 with honours. And that's my story. Wow. I've gone on to do further study, 1 year as an intern, 1 year as a resident in the hospital system, and then going on to do further studies to become a general practitioner. So wow, it's a long story.
Wow. It you know what though, it speaks to where we started, which was that you feel so passionate about what you're doing, that's what takes us allows us the presence to move through those challenges, those midlife challenges, the just everyday challenges, and to commit to a 6, actually, because there was the residencies and et cetera, it was 6 years plus 2 more, plus the 2 for high school. So at age 42, you're committing 10 years of your life to education. And I think the only way that that's possible is when you have so much passion about something that you can see beyond the immediate of all the things that the world tells us. You're too old, you have brain fog, you're going to wake up in the middle of the night, you'll be exhausted in class, like all the stuff. And all of the stuff may be there, it may not be there. Our mind is going to tell us that it's going to be there. And so holding on to and being that Stephanie, you earlier had mentioned the word longing, right? Of really stepping into that longing and trusting that there would be something for you, not just on the other side of that, because you can't just put your life aside for 10 years, that it's also during it. Let me ask you, did you feel fed? As I know you said you had some problems and that you almost quit, and was there also times where you really felt fed by what you were doing?
Absolutely. I had, my passion really carried me through. I had this focus that, as you say, I was going to make it, and I was going to strive to make a difference in my little corner of the world with the people that I serve. And that's how I look at what I do. I serve the people that come to consult with me. And so for me, I'll admit, I did have that brain fog. And so for me, whilst other people seem to just really catch on quickly, I actually had to work really hard at what I did. But it was that goal of, I'm going to get through, and that belief that I was going to get through that kept me fed. I was very blessed by having some fabulous friends that were around me. And there was Matt and Hallie, who I met on the first day of medical school, actually. And Matt was, I think, probably in his 30s, and he was excited to see me because then he wasn't the oldest, mature age student. And he and his wife and their family just took me under their wing and, nourished me, physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. It was fabulous. And my friend Hallie, again, just such a wonderful friend and support. And when times would get challenging, because as I say, life happens, as you're making other plans. So as we were doing our medical degree, life happened in different ways to everybody that went through the degree in my cohort. We would take our cars and carpool, and we called it the psych couch. So we'd debrief sometimes as we'd be driving to our classes, and then we'd go, right, we're ready, we're going for it, and we're here. So we would. Aww. Yeah. And there were also the faculty themselves were really good, if I can just mention that. There was a stage, as many women in midlife, there are physical changes, there are mental changes, there are social changes that occur in lives. And so I went through a really challenging time. My mother died. There was a separation, and the divorce was finalized. And then, there was a major move to the North Coast to be part of the rural clinical school, because that was a choice on my part to move there, but I hadn't realized these other factors were going to all converge at the same time. And every 2 years there is something called a barrier exam. So you have, every session has its own exams, and that's fine, and you can try again if you have failed. I didn't. However, when the barrier exam comes at the end of every 2 years, if you fail that exam, it's like, thank you very much, but thank you, goodbye. You don't get a second chance at that. So it is a barrier exam. And I remember this all happened at the beginning of my 4th year. And as I went through the year, I thought, it was like everything was washing over the top of me, and I couldn't think. I had even worse brain fog. And I thought, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to pass this exam at the end of the year. And so I went to see my head of school, and I wasn't sure when I went through that door to meet with her whether I was going to actually quit from medicine or whether there was some way that I could get through this. And I have to say, women are so collegial and so supportive, and I couldn't have done it without my head of school and the other wonderful, amazing women around me. And she said, look, what is it that we can do to support you through this? So I went and saw a doctor. I will admit I was depressed at the time, so I was treated for depression. I was given, the opportunity to participate in extra tutorials. And that was fabulous, because when I'd gotten to 3rd year, I was actually tutoring other other years, that had years 1, 2, and 3 to help them through. So then I was able to actually experience that for myself. And thankfully I got through. And then so there we are. I've forgotten the question.
I think what you are sharing is such that, well, one, we need each other. We need a community that we can lean on when we're like really falling over, or our internal sanctuary is no longer there for us to rest into. And I think what I hear you saying too is like, you asked for help and then let it in. And that takes a tremendous amount of courage. And when I think of soulful leaders, it's like, it's not so much, I think we get so caught up about marks or our age or what it looks like and then the outer, but what was going on internally for you, Dr. Rosie, was so immense. Like, it was almost like in everything in your life, whether it was health or your emotional state, your mental state, everything was like completely, it was there. And so it's kind of like when I think of like a 12-step program, like we hit rock bottom, and there was also something very beautiful in there too, because what was compelling you to do that was to be in service to others. And I think when we don't just have goals or ideals, but there's also something bigger than just ourselves that we are serving. You're held. I was thinking about what you were sharing with wanting to do the health food store, and the next thing it comes out in the paper. It's like, you have these, like, which comes first. Sometimes you wonder, did I get that that intuitive guidance, and then I opened up the paper and there it was, or was it because it was coming and I was a receptacle to it? It doesn't matter, does it? What really matters is that you had in your heart the space and the capacity and the willingness to actually ask for help, get it, and then also see it. And I think that's saying something to your leadership because there's a lot. I just think about menopause brain. I mean, we were laughing before we all got on here together because we were talking about a movie and this actor, and the three of us, we all knew that actor and we couldn't come up with a name. I said, my God, our brains together isn't even one brain right now. Like, we're all having these, like, what is that? We know what it is. And we're so hard on ourselves, aren't we?
We are. What I loved about your story, Dr. Rosie, was that oftentimes when we hear somebody's success story, we don't hear the vulnerable parts, the hard parts. And we think, oh my gosh, and I have to do this on my own. Like, look at what she accomplished, which is amazing and inspiring. And also knowing that, like, it was hard too, and that you didn't do it by yourself. You had a lot of help. And I think, especially for women, and maybe especially for women, of our age range and who are menopausal, it's like we were taught to do everything. Don't let anyone know you're hurting. And at least I was, like keep it all inside. Don't let anybody know. And, make sure that the outer looks all good. And then, like keeping up with the Joneses, the whole thing of like, I can do it all. And when I do it all, then I will be good enough. And I'm not even sure at this point in my life, I'm like, good enough for what? Like, what was I trying to prove? Like what what syrup what did I drink? I drank the syrup of our culture, and I think many of us did. And I think there are a lot of us that are starting to wake up to that and saying, wait a minute, I inherently am good enough. I can ask for help. I can allow help. And what is this BS that I'm too old or I'm not, like all of this stuff, right? So for our listeners, Stephanie and I met Dr. Rosie at a speakers conference, and when she was speaking, she had this lovely whole beginning of her talk is these amazing women and the things that they've done post menopause, and how they were told, like we're all told, oh, you're too old. That's you're like you're beyond whatever. You have a great. What is that phrase that you use, Dr. Rosie?
Oh, the Native American, is that the one? The Native American saying is
No, the
no.
one that you used from Wikipedia or from the dictionary that's like
Okay.
that tells us that we're over the hill.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
if I can just go back for a minute, if that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I started researching for my book, which is on approaching the pause, and I did what every good evidence-based researcher did. I actually Googled the meaning of midlife, and so I looked at thesaurus.com. And it's there today. I actually looked at it again this morning, and it says midlife, the wrong side of 40.
There you go. Mm.
The wrong side of 40.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
No
So we've
wonder
got
we
to
have
change that.
like right? No wonder we have issues. Like we hit a point and we're dismissed. And so we feel like we need to change who we are instead of one of the things in your book that I love is you are part of a native peoples that actually honor and embrace women as they get older for their wisdom. And
Oh,
obviously our culture doesn't do that. And it's like you said, I want to be a part of changing that. Very much so.
and
Yeah,
I would love to have you share what that honoring is because I think we all need to hear that.
Yes, please.
thank you. So I'm an Indigenous woman in Australia, an Australian Aboriginal woman, and Indigenous women here are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander and Torres Strait Islander, and so we do honor, the wisdom of elders. The quote that I actually shared in the talk comes from a Native American saying, and that resonates with me and my culture as well. So if I may share that from the Native
Please.
American saying, it is at Menarche a woman enters her power. During her reproductive years, she practices her power. And at menopause, she owns her power.
I get goosebumps when you
I
do
love
that.
And it's true.
It's
so true. I remember when I was studying, herbal medicine and, all of those naturopathic studies, I was, much younger then. And there was a lovely lady who was about 30 years older than I. was at that time. And she was going through menopause, and we would have discussions, and she would say how invisible she was starting to feel. And I didn't really understand, in my 20s, what that meant. However, as I've, come through this time, I recognize that many women do feel that way, that they do feel unappreciated and invisible. And you know what? I'm here about, let's make a noise, because we're not going to be silent. We're not going to be shushed. We're here to live our best, powerful version of who we are. And I truly believe that each of us, we're all individuals, but we can be the best, most powerful person that we are at this stage of life. I truly believe that. And one of the reasons I believe that is one of my patients, who, I suppose I should say clients, but because I'm a doctor, we tend to say patients. I really am grateful for the wisdom that they teach me. And one beautiful woman said to me, she brings her whole body of experience to this time in her life. And I agree. I said to her, I'm going to share that, because that's true. We bring all of this wisdom, all of the experiences. This is a really empowered time of life if we choose to look at it that way. So rather than looking at the negatives, how about we take the positives, the lessons that we've learned, the wisdom that we've gained, and really share that not only with ourselves, but have that ripple effect, into our families, into our communities. And I truly believe that each of us has that ability to do that, to have this brilliant ripple effect across the whole of society, across the whole of the world. And when I was meditating one day, I actually saw that. It was this drop of, I was a drop coming from a tap, and I paused for a moment, then I dripped into this really still pond, and I saw the influence that I had, just this ripple effect. And then as I looked, I saw other drops coming from the sky, and there were more and more until it was just a huge rainstorm, and I realized this is all of us as women. We are there, and as each of us shares our unique and individual gifts and talents, in a positive way, we just can have a ripple effect across the whole of the world. And we have no idea how far those ripples go. And that lifts all the boats in the harbor together.
I love the metaphor of the drop, because I remember having a conversation with, actually, it was Deanne Fitzpatrick, who we've had on the podcast before. And she and I were speaking about a drop versus a boulder that gets in, that creates a huge wave. And I think that's what happens when we're like a slingshot, right? When we haven't owned our own power ourselves, or we've taken on the projections of other people trying to squash us or keep us quiet, like the Barbie movie, right? Of that part, that we get into that slingshot mode of that, then we have to overcome it, and we react and we make the boulder, instead of really going inward and owning that power and being vulnerable and collaboratively coming together, asking for help. How those ripples not only radiate with one ripple, but how it inspires all the other droplets too, that we can do it beautifully without making a huge lot of waves, and yet make an incredible amount of impact with less damage and more joy.
I think that is the gift of menopause. If there, like, we think of all of the challenges of menopause, and there are, and we have a whole book about them, your wonderful book, Dr. Rosie. And I do want to talk about those and that book, and the owning of our power. Of when we're younger, we tend to be the boulder. We plow through, we're the bull in the china shop.
Mm-hmm.
And the wisdom that we glean through our years, and then getting to that place of ownership of, like, you know what, I'm really valuable, and I don't need to prove it to anyone, and I can just be it. That is what is going to change the world. That is all of the small drops instead of the boulder that's like empty out the pond, right? So it's just, we do need to address, we do need to talk about and bring to the forefront the challenges of menopause in order for us to own our gifts around it. And that's one of the things, one of the reasons, just one of the many, and I think our listeners are gathering that, like, I think they've all fallen in love with you too. So one of the reasons that Stephanie and I fell in love with you is, like, you have so much that you've brought to the table, and your book being one of them. Can you tell us a little bit about the book and, what you see as kind of why you wrote it and its purpose in the world?
Thank you. Okay. Well, the book is called Approaching the Pause, and it's on candid conversations on the journey towards menopause. So perhaps if I start about my why, if I may. What I was finding is, so maybe I'll just tell you. It's what it is it's a number of different symptoms that women may experience as they go through this transitional time and beyond into the fabulous time of their life, their third act. And there were many people that I was seeing in my consulting room that just didn't understand what was happening as they were moving through their midlife years. And so, if I may, there's a number of symptoms that people might experience. Their heart, they might get some palpitations, they might be having escalating nervousness or anxiety. They may be feeling more irritable with mood swings. There's the hot flashes that we've talked about, the night sweats, which are hot flashes that are occurring at nights. There's disrupted sleep. About 60% of women will actually experience this as they move through this time. And, there's I call it drama down under. There's symptoms, with low libido and vaginal dryness. And, so there's a whole lot of different symptoms or experience that women may experience. And many women would say, oh, I didn't know that was part of what was going on. And there was one particular lady, I remember I'd been seeing her for about 5 years, and I thought we had a really good professional relationship. And this particular day I said to her, I was just going through, so, are you having any leakage when you're laughing, jumping, sneezing? And she said, yes. And I said, oh, okay. So how long has that been going on for you? And she said, 4 years. And I was just, I felt so badly for her and badly for me that I hadn't actually asked that question specifically, and badly for her that she had felt really embarrassed because I'd said, I'm curious, why hadn't we talked about this? And she said, because I was really embarrassed. And so I recognized that there are so many women out there that are experiencing symptoms that they may not attribute or to this changing time in their life, or they're too embarrassed to talk about it. And these women that I've seen are even too embarrassed to talk about it to their intimate partners as well. So they're feeling really isolated. And so that was my reason of why to get this out there and to make it less taboo, because it has been a taboo subject. So to really get it out there and to have these really candid conversations about things that may feel uncomfortable or embarrassing, and to do that. And so what happened? So that's my part of it. And I wrote this book with JoAnne Vines, and she is a friend of mine, and she and I and a couple of other business ladies get together about once a month, and we're great buddies, and we talk about, de-escalate about the business side of life and the challenges that we might be having. And at one of these dinners, JoAnne started to talk about her experience of starting to go through menopause, and she is really very funny, and she in the book.
I just want to say, reading your book, I so want to meet her.
Oh,
I'm like,
she's fabulous.
she is my person.
She's,
Like,
yeah.
I think she came right out of my mouth. Like, I'm like, I love her. She's hysterical.
She is
She is.
hysterical.
Can
It
I
made the
read?
book very fun. It could
I
be a
know.
very dry subject, no pun
Yeah,
intended, but
yeah, yeah.
oh my God, it was hilarious.
She is absolutely hilarious. And I think that would be fantastic if we did another one that we have, JoAnne comes in here and you have a chat to her. May I just read one little
Sure.
bit of hers? It's just a little paragraph. This is about we've got an error on weight gain, and we've called it middle tire disease. This is from JoAnne, like the Michelin tire, because things shift.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, she says, did you know there's a control garment for every part of a woman's body, from her neck down to her knees, including a G-string? I know this because I have them all, including the boy leg, the full brief, the half brief, the skirt, the full dress, the under the bust to knee, and even the under the bust over the shoulder to the knee in 2 colors, beige and black. Yeah. So, and then she goes on that, in your I called it shapewear in my 30s, which was used to achieve no underlie line. Control wear in my 40s to pull in a few extra bumps I had acquired over the previous decade. And now in my 50s, it's miracle wear. Having worn these elasticized straight jackets for the past 20 years, I now pray for a miracle that they will fit and perform the magic they claim to do. So I agree. So the way that, so we've looked at many of the different symptoms that women may experience in their midlife as in this transition. There's periods, contraception, weight gain called middle tire disease, mood swings, dry and itchy skin, hot flashes, insomnia, vaginal dryness, low libido, the waterworks, and so there's a whole lot. So what happens is JoAnne has her Dear Diary, which is, I've just read just a little tiny excerpt. And then she writes, so how it affects her. And then she writes a Dear Dr. Rosie letter to me with about 3 or 4 questions that she would like to have answered. And then I answer that question in a Dear Jo letter. And hopefully using those in a conversational way. And then at the end of each chapter, there is a fast facts. So I've really narrowed down all the key points that deal with that particular symptom. And that way, when a woman or a person reads the book, they can either, go from start to finish, or they can just read what really concerns them. And then they may dive in and read Dear Diary of JoAnne's, because it helps women to feel like we're not alone. And that was one of the big purposes, to give you, from my point of view, some information, that improve your health literacy. And then you can go along to your doctor and have a bit of a chat about what might be concerning you if you need to. Or I've given a whole suite of options, from lifestyle recommendations to, some of the nutritional and herbal supplements that are available. So a whole smorgasbord of options that you might like to investigate. So that's
I love it. And I think it's such a great handbook on how to love ourselves through this, and to empower ourselves to the wisdom that we really truly are. And I think there might even be another book that you could do, Rosie, and you and I talked about this. It's men in our lives. It's like, how do they understand what we're going through? And I also believe that men go through it, whether it's, directly or indirectly, they're going through it, because if they're a part of our lives, they're going through it because they have to. And I think there's a whole handbook there on how to understand us, how to work with us through that part, and learning how to be in a leadership role. Like, there was another excerpt of Jo that talks about, having a massive hot flash. Thank God she says she's wearing black. And I'm like, oh, I cannot tell you, here I am, having hot flashes, and I'm like measuring them almost like contractions, going, okay, I'm having one every 20 minutes. It's lasting. It's so intense. I'm dripping, and I'm working on clients, and here it is during COVID, and I'm dripping sweat on it. This is not professional. And then what goes on inside me is so not so loving, really, what's going on. And it's like, if that's going inside of me and then I'm in reaction to it, it's like, how do we move this up in another level of mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? And I think when other people are around us, instead of saying, oh, well, she's just going through the change. Like, I can't stand that. It was like, when you're younger and you're going through menses, we would call it, the curse. And I'm like, gosh, I'm about the empowerment of the feminine, whether you have chosen your identity as a male or a female or whatever you've chosen. We still have those energies of male and female energies within us. And we've been so encultured in our societies that it's the masculine energy that is important. And yet that's like saying our exhale is more important than our inhale. We have not addressed what the feminine energies are, to actually look within ourselves and to love ourselves and to not feel shame about what's going on. Like you expressed about your patient. Shame is so pervasive and it separates us and it disconnects us. And yet we all are going through some level of something. And it's like, the more we can be vulnerable, like you said, Maren, the vulnerability, that's actually what brings us together. And it doesn't mean that you're a hot mess, even though, we're a hot mess, but it doesn't have to have that way. That being vulnerable in a place of leadership is coming actually from a place of love and courage. And of, from what you have shared with us and how, and where you are now and where you're going. I think we could do so many podcasts with you. You have a lot to share. And I'm so grateful that you're here, that you've given us the time to really understand this topic that is really not, researched and expressed and acknowledged as it's sacred that it so is.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I love the fact that you're addressing it from a sacred place. So yes, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Dr. Rosie, I know that a lot of our listeners are like, okay, so tell us how we can get in touch with her. And something that Stephanie mentioned earlier, you have 10 commandments. Can you tell us about the 10 commandments and then tell us how our listeners can get the 10 commandments and get in touch with you?
Thank you. Okay. Well, this is what I share with my lovely, clients, my patients, when they're going through a difficult time, and even when they're not going through a difficult time, because I think it's really beneficial. It's called the 10 Commandments for Reducing Stress, and it's attributed to Hillary. So I'll read number 1. Thou shalt not be perfect, nor even try to be. Thou shalt not try to be all things to all people. Do you want me to read the lot or just
no?
Yes.
No. Okay. Do you want me to read?
I'm going, oh yes. No.
Do you want me to read?
I think that the people can actually download that from your website, can't they?
Yeah, they can.
Yeah.
So if I can share,
give them the little teaser there and let them go download.
All right. So let me give you a couple of my favorites. This is the 10 Commandments for Reducing Stress. Number 1, thou shalt not be perfect, nor even try to be. How many times guilty. So I read that a lot. Number 5, thou shalt learn to say no. I think that's a really important one. I actually get my patients to I've got a mirror in my room, and we go over to the mirror and I get them to practice saying no. No.
I love that.
No, because it's something that we don't necessarily hear or feel comfortable with. So I get them to really practice in front of the mirror. And the 10 Commandments for Reducing Stress is a downloadable PDF that I encourage you to stick on your mirror so you can see it, and maybe another one on your fridge so anybody else living in the house with you or wherever you live can hear that as well, can look at that as well. So, and the way that you can access is go to www.drrosieross.com, and there is a spot on there where you can just enter your name and your email, and you'll be able to get this, as well as a series of day by day, the 10 commandments. So I've expanded a bit on each of them. That only takes about 2 or 3 minutes for each of them. And hopefully it will be of service to you and assist you in your life.
They're beautiful, and I love the little videos that goes with them each day. So that I do. I downloaded it. I have it posted in my house, and I've been watching the videos. I'm a groupie, I suppose. I would also remind our listeners that all of the links are in our show notes. So you'll get a link for the where you can go to get the 10 Commandments, and also where you can go to find Dr. Rosie's amazing book that we talked about, Approaching the Pause. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Rosie. I do think that there are many more conversations in our future. So hopefully you'll come back and be a guest on our show again. So thank you so much.
It's been a real honor. Thank you.
It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. So don't forget that you can find us on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook under The Soulful Leaders. And we will see you all next week on the Soulful Leader podcast. Thanks for joining us.
And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader podcast with your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren Oslack. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.